In this lab, we're going to deploy an edge cluster, and we're going to do that from SDDC Manager. So if you know anything about me and you've heard me talk about this, we talk about, this is change in administration. So if you're used to administering vSphere, it's a little bit of a change because we have all of these automations and workflows available to us now in SDDC Manager. So this is just getting a little bit more comfortable with that. And then also, if you haven't done a lot of networking or have exposure to NSX, this just gives us a little bit of opportunity to do some networking configuration as well. All right, let's do something here for a moment. And we want to go to the desktop for a second. So I'm just going to minimize this. And I want to open this little diagram here. So when we talk about creating edges, these are routing components, and you'll notice we've got edge 1 and edge 2, and in particular we have these uplinks. So the TEPs, those are covered in the NSX section. The management, again, this is like a management VM kernel port that you might be used to in vSphere. But then these uplinks are really important because this is what ties us to our upstream router. All right, so let's just get a picture of what's going on here. Below these structures, so down here, this is our VCF instance, or basically our east-west workloads in the data center. What these edges do is give us a control point inside of VCF. So these components, they're now peering via BGP to my existing routing components in the data center. So this may be top of rack switches, just depends on the architecture. So essentially this is our north-south control point coming out of VCF and peering with our existing infrastructure in the data center so that these components have outside access or inside out access if, again, these are applications that we're running for business revenue or whatever it might be. Okay, so just want to take a second to use that diagram, and feel free to refer back to that. And you notice that this opens up in Chrome, so we actually have a tab here. So we can kind of go back and forth. So if we get a little bit confused about what's going on, you can flip over here to the diagram and take a look at what we're entering. So you notice that there's IP addresses on here, and we're going to be entering these as we configure the workflow to deploy these edges. So again, you can confer back and forth so that it makes a little bit more sense. All right, so we're going to go to SDDC Manager here. We're on kind of our main dashboard page. And if we scroll up so we can see everything, because the last few exercises have been down here in the bottom, kind of managing passwords or developer center for utilizing API Explorer. We're going to come up here to the top, and under inventory, we're going to click workload domains. All right, I'll scroll down just a little bit here so that you can see this. It's the only workload domain we have right now, which is the management workload domain. So we're going to click on that. And from our actions menu, we're going to click Add Edge Cluster. All right, so this is going to start the workflow for our edge cluster. Now, again, one of the really cool things about SDDC Manager is it gives us these workflows where we can kind of see what we're going to do. And there are certain things that may be optional, or maybe we want to make a change in configuration or reserve something for later. So it gives us lots of things here that we could potentially choose. Normally we just do a select all, which builds all the structures that we would potentially need for any future configuration. And then that way we don't have to come back and do any of this. But you have complete flexibility here. But we usually just go ahead and do it this way by default. So we'll click begin. And then we got to fill out a bunch of stuff here. Now in this part of the lab, you're going to be filling in a lot of host names and passwords, VLAN IDs, IP addresses. So just follow all the parameters in the lab guide very carefully. Just take a few minutes to do this, and then we will kick off this deployment. All right, so we're going to call it Edge Cluster 01, 8900 on the MTU, and then our names of our routers. So these are all Site A. That SA is Site A. And our management domain, Cluster 01. And this is our first T0 router. And then we'll do Site A, our management domain, Cluster 01. And so we're giving the T1 and T0 router names, just calling them exactly what they are. And then that way, kind of keep things simple. So this naming convention, you'll see this a lot, particularly if you've looked at the parameter worksheet. It's pre-populated with a lot of things that are very similar to this. So we've created this naming strategy to try to keep things somewhat consistent. So you'll see a lot of these things repeated. Only thing you might do, of course, is just enter whatever you want to call this here. So we have Site A, Site B, just because in some labs we have 2 instances, and so that's where these things come from. On the cluster type, we're just going to do default, and then we need to go in here and put our passwords. Now, we have a different password requirement here, so it has to be a little bit longer. So it's just going to be our double lab password. So to prevent mistakes, you guys have already seen I'm an excellent typist. We're just going to try to minimize my errors. All right, so we'll go ahead and check all these bad boys. All right, we look good. Just double checking the name, make sure to make any typos, and we'll click next. All right, so just kind of rolling along here, you notice that you have some edge cluster types. So Kubernetes. So if our workload domain is particularly going to be enabled for Kubernetes, we would choose this. Application virtual networks. This is a set of segments that can be stretched. These are for our ARIA components. If you watch this entire series of labs, we'll tackle that later. So we're just going to click custom. All right. Now, there are some different edge form factor sizes. I'm going to choose medium. And then on the tier 0 service high availability, we want active. And then our routing type is going to be eBGP, right? We're utilizing BGP for this. And the ASN, which again comes from this diagram here. You'll see we've got 65003. Okay, we'll click next. And it's asking me what we want to name the edge node. So our first one here is going to be SA and MO1, EN for edge node 01, .vcf.sddc.local. All right, make sure I didn't make any typos here. And then the cluster we're going to assign this to. We only have one choice. I love it when that happens. We'll do a L2 uniform. You can click the little question mark here if you want this. And all this means is all hosts in the clusters have identical management, T0 uplinks, and host TEP networks. So that, again, you can see from the diagram that was true. All right, and then we need to enter some IP addresses here, so be careful with all this. So this is 172.20.10.54 with a 24-bit mask. The management gateway is 172.20.10.254. The edge TEP1 IP address is 172.20.14.1. The edge TEP2 IP address is 172.20.14.2. Our TEP gateway is 172.20.14.254. And the VLAN is 2014. All right, so before we get too far, where in the world did all that come from? All right, so let's go back to our diagram here. So this 172.14.1 and 14.2. is right here. So we're on the first edge. So 172.14.1, 172.14.2. So that's our two TEP IP addresses, okay? All right, so we'll come back here, and now we need to configure the uplink. So I'm going to scroll this down. Sorry, VLAN. And you see that VLAN, this dark blue VLAN is VLAN 2014. Our management VLAN is 2010. You can see that pulled that in. If we go up here, we see our management VLAN right here. All right. And then for the tier 0, we're going to do 22. I'll do the same thing. I'll enter everything, and I'll go back to the diagram so you can see where this came from. So this is 172.20.12.54. Our BGP peer IP address, 172.20.12.254. The peer ASN 65001, and the BGP peer password. Again, if you're not a network person, very standard practice. I mean, back when this came, passwords on for routing a long time ago. I can't even remember, decades. But this is very common. So when you get to working with infrastructure folks, you're going to need these passwords to be able to establish these adjacencies. Okay. All right. So that was basically the tier 0 uplink. All right. So we saw this right here. So our 172.20.12.254 peering with 172.20.12.254 AS65001. That's why we're doing eBGP, because this is 65003. 65001, two different ASs, so that is eBGP as opposed to iBGP, where you have the same autonomous system number. All right, scroll down just a little bit here, and we need to configure that second uplink. So that's VLAN 2013. This is 172.20.13.54. And then our peer address is 172.20.13.254. ASN 65001. All right, just making sure we got everything right here. We'll scroll up, make sure we don't have any mistakes. Everything looks good. Just double checking these here. Make sure I don't have any mistakes. All right, cool. Now, you notice that it didn't give me a next here. And that's because obviously we need to have a minimum of 2 edge nodes. So we need to click Add Edge Node, and we've got our first. So our first one's been configured, but minimum is required, tells you this. So it's not going to give us a next until we get the second one configured. So we're going to click Add More Edge Nodes. And we're basically going to do the same procedure all over again. So if we scroll down here, You notice that it's got our first edge node that we just added. So the cool thing is, you notice that it pre-populated the settings that we had entered for the first node. So since everything is going to be very similar except for some name and IP address changes, it just saves us a lot of typing. So again, a lot of thought been put into this to help minimize a lot of the typos and other things that we typically make. So it's just going to be called Edge Node 2. It's going to be same cluster type. And then we just have a few IP address changes here. So very typical in network design. We keep these all within the same range. So they're typically one IP address off from each other. Gateways are going to be the same. And so instead of 14.1 and 14.2, this will be 14.3, 14.4. And so for those TEP gateways, if you come back here, we entered 14.1 and 14.2 on the first one, 14.3 and 14.4 on the second one. So that's where those came from. It's all in the same VLAN. All right, so now we got to work on our uplinks. Okay, so again, IP addresses are just going to be one off. So 54 changes to 55. Same VLAN, same autonomous system, same password. And so again, on the BGP configuration, just to clarify this, we're doing 55 on the first uplink. So that would be 1255 on the first uplink, which pairs with 12.254 over here. And then 13.55 on the second uplink, which pairs with 13.254 over here. All right, so we're in the first uplink, VLAN 2013. So this is going to change again to 55. Sorry. If we're down here, yeah. Yep. This is going to be 55. Gateway, the PRIP address is the same, autonomous system is the same, password is the same. And let's just make sure that we don't have any other mistakes here. So let's be really careful with this before we add this in. All right, so we changed the name to O2. Management IP address changed from to 55. The TEPs are 3 and 4. So for our BGP configuration, we've got 12.55 pairing to 12.254 and 13.55 pairing to 13.254. All right, let's verify that on our diagram here. So 12.55 pairing to 12.254 on VLAN 2012, and then 13.55 pairing to 13.54 here on VLAN 2013. All right, looks good. Click Add Edge Node. We've got 2 edge nodes now, and our management IP address here pops up with our name, so all that looks pretty good, and we know we've got things right, so we'll click Next. Now, here's a summary page, so you can go back through everything again. It allows you just to see everything. All right, don't see anything jumps out at me there, so we'll click Next. Now what's going to happen here, and this is another thing if you're unfamiliar with VCF, is we have these workflows to help us with everything. But then what it's going to do is before it actually executes, it's going to validate all of these settings. So in most cases, you can't really fake what's going on. So if you have a router adjacency, it's checking to make sure that that can be established. If you have, password issues or like an NTP, whatever your NTP source is, right? It's validating all of those. So if you made a mistake or if something is incorrect that's already on the other side, right? It should have been pre-configured. It helps you walk through all these things. So just making sure everything is right before we deploy this. And this is probably one of the best things about VCF that I like, because there's a lot of complexity here, but it's a lot of help, right? It walks you through the configuration and then it validates everything before it actually deploys something that's incorrect. And then we got to go back and figure out where the mistake is. If we have a mistake, it'll tell us right here and we go back and fix it. All right, so all of our tasks succeeded, all green. So we'll click finish. And now what it's going to do is go and deploy this. Okay. All right, it's going to take about an hour for these to deploy. One of the things that you can do while you're waiting, especially if this is the first time you've seen this, is click on the link around the task, and then you can expand this. So there's a little set of arrows right here where you can expand this, and you can kind of just watch what all's going on with these subtasks. So you can just kind of see where it is and watch what all's going on. It's kind of cool. All right, so we'll let this run, and I'll see you in the next lab.